as far as kind of the mindset of on-prem folks, developers versus cloud developers when it comes to like compliance and frameworks like that?
When it comes to compliance. So I think one of the challenges we have with compliance is that many of those frameworks, were not written with cloud in mind, which makes sense. Mm-hmm. But as soon as we introduce the cloud's shared responsibility model, and a number of those controls get either taken by a cloud provider or partially taken by a cloud provider, it gets a lot more muddy as like what's remaining.
Yes.
Right? And so one of the things that we've been helping people do is navigate those controls and understand like what does that mean in your environment. Mm-hmm. We learn that kind of the hard way, right? By working with assessors and understanding what they're looking for. But that's something that general developers have no interest in navigating.
Yes, I will 100% agree with that. I think that especially I've been working on a lot of FedRAMP things right now and trying to even, I guess, translate what is written as the control to developers is somewhat difficult, right? Especially when you are, now things are a little bit closer to being cloud friendly than they were. But that's kind of a new adjustment. Before this, it hadn't really been updated for several years before that.
Yeah. I still think that compliance can do a great job of forcing people to take their security a little bit more seriously, right? It's not going to guarantee things, but it's an opportunity for people to try to do things right and look at those controls and say, how would I apply those in my environment, and what value can I get out of them?
I think that it's really nice to have those, whether it be a compliance framework or a framework of a different sort to work around. It gives you kind of like check marks, right? It gives you ideas of what needs to be taken care of, what needs to be assessed, and sometimes it even gives recommendations on maybe like how to do that a little bit.
Yeah. The nice thing about cloud, of course, is that a number of those things drop off the list, yeah. Right? Like you get to pass that on to your cloud provider and just say in your compliance spreadsheet, like, this is inherited, yep. Right? And that part's nice, but there's still a lot left.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And it's a little unclear in some situations as to what is left and what's not. Like encryption, for example, is one of the things where like, okay, is this something that we'll say Google takes care of for me, or is this something that I need to take care of in my own databases and in my own areas? And I think that it kind of depends on the system, right? So there's no one direct answer for everything.
Yeah. And unfortunately, when it comes to something like encryption, there might be variations of like, right. Well, is it a customer managed key or can my cloud provider manage that key? And then you're like, okay, well, I'm going to set it up this way, but then that service doesn't, talk with, can't use a customer managed key. And so you run into a lot of like edge cases there. I think that we've done it enough that we've learned from those things and we can avoid them.
Definitely.
But it's very frustrating when a developer runs into that themselves and they're like, why? Like, this is not providing any value.
Yes, absolutely. I agree.
So I am curious, from your perspective, what activities do you think organizations could be doing that provide high value for their investment?
So as far as security goes, one of the big ones that I see a lot is way over provisioned IAM, right? So like provisioned access that is either from people who have left or like it can be from all kinds of crazy things. So basically just taking a review of their environment, mm-hmm. starting with those permissions. I think that would be super beneficial. What kind of things have you seen?
Yeah, no, it's interesting you bring up the access because we provision access, but we never take it away, right?
Ever.
Until somebody leaves the organization, right? So it does make sense to do a thorough periodic review and say, like, what are we actually using? I think one of the things that we're seeing more in the cloud is that we can actually review all the logs that somebody did and say this is the access they actually needed, right? And so we didn't actually interrupt their work, but we reduced risk. So that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And like there's tools that'll even do that for you, right? So like Access Analyzer and things like that, you can go in and take a look at those. So it makes it really easy to be able to scope things down to least privilege.
Sure. The other activity that I think is really high value is just generally taking a more robust approach to your exercises, right? Whether it's incident response or disaster recovery, but really thinking through those exercises and not just hand waving over them, right? So if you can think through, likely scenarios and say, where are we going to detect this, right? Where might it happen? And how would we assess the impact of this? How would we respond and mitigate it? And then how would we recover, from it?
Yeah.
If you think through that entire process, you're probably going to find some things along the way that you should be doing better. And I think it makes a lot of sense to to actually take that seriously and not just hand wave over it.
I think that's a really great point, and I think putting those into actual practice, practicing when something goes wrong and when you need to retrieve your data and redeploy it. Things like that are something that, if something goes wrong, you're going to be kind of in panic mode, but if you've done it at least once before, you'll have something backing you up where you feel at least a little bit more comfortable in doing so.
Yeah. One of the big concerns we hear from people is around ransomware, right? They see that that's hitting, a lot of industries, and it doesn't matter who you are, right? Whether you're a small business or a big business, and they don't have any concern for the impact that it has on people, right? So doing a ransomware exercise and saying what are the things that if someone locked this up, I would be really in trouble for, right? And then how would I detect that? How would I know,
Right.
Do I have the backups configured on this? Can I actually recover from those backups? And also, can I rebuild my environment, right? What if somebody locked up my entire environment? Do I have a backup of my code and my infrastructure? How long would it take me to stand up my environment?
Right.
Again, if it was completely destroyed by ransomware.
Yeah, to go from zero back to production.
Yeah.
I think that's really interesting, and I think there's a lot of companies that are kind of oh, that would never happen to me. Like you mentioned, even the small ones these days are kind of up in the air for that. So I think that it's a really great idea to practice those things before it actually comes to the moment when you need it.
Yeah, and that's not to say that everybody needs to be able to recover everything within 4 hours, right? That might not be your objective, but at least being able to do it within the week, right? So your business doesn't go down.
Absolutely.
But if it goes on longer than that, if your detection takes months and all your backups are poisoned, you might never be able to come back from that.
Yeah, much easier to get ahead of it.